Hello, Scott. Agreed. Now the first thing we should answer is, what is euthanasia? Euthanasia is the act of taking of a patient's life through direct administration of drugs by their doctor. Also, we should clarify a few other things, such as different kinds of euthanasia. The three kinds are voluntary, which is someone being euthanized of their own free will, non-voluntary, where the patient is unable to answer, and involuntary, where they are being euthanized against their will. I think we're ready to begin. Well, first I would like to answer the question of, who would this affect and why should I care? To start off with, the question affects everybody who is at risk for cancer, car crashes, and even partial drowning. All of those risks and many others could lead to a situation where one might wish for euthanasia. The good thing is, however, it's not legal yet. Although you bring up an interesting point, it is inherently flawed. You are stating that because the government would not allow her to be euthanized, it did not value her as a human. This is the opposite of the truth, as the government was merely supporting her right to life, which is the right of humans to live their life without death being forced on them. It's the highest human the right can have. Therefore, you can see that Chantal Sabir was being treated with the highest respect and not being mistreated. Well, this brings me to my next point, which is the Hippocratic Oath. The Hippocratic Oath is the oath that all doctors take when they become doctors, so that they will do no intentional harm to patients. It even says in the oath, "It may also be within my power to take a life. This awesome responsibility must be faced with great humbleness and awareness of my own frailty. Above all, I must not play at God." This is showing that you must not play at God or, in other definitions, take a human's life because you think that you can and that it is necessary, even if they do have a deadly condition. For even so, even if they are dying, all doctors must respect the patient's right to life. The Hippocratic Oath also tells how a doctor should act morally. So, thus, by breaking the oath, you are taking an immoral action which should be avoided at all costs. Your point is valid, but what about the mental effects of pain? If the patient is as much pain as you say, they could be put out of their minds and not be able to make a rational decision about euthanasia. The pain of their lives could be very great, but if it should interfere with their decision-making, then they should not be allowed to make the decision concerning their life. Also, medical futility only applies to cases where there is no chance of survival, such as in a car crash where the jugular is cut and they are already good as dead. This choice does not apply to cancer and the like. For example, say a truck had just hit you and you only had a 1 in 20 chance of survival. Would you choose to accept the treatment, or would you let the paramedics leave you in the middle of the road? Now, one might think that if the paramedics decided not to help, you would be considered the murderers. Now, the point I'm trying to make is that euthanasia is like that. It's tantamount to murder. If you are killing a human being with pre-planned intent, then you are committing a murder according to U.S. law. As euthanasia is tantamount to murder, if you would allow euthanasia, you are allowing murder. But what if the family had enough money to pay for chemotherapy but simply didn't wish to? As immoral as that sounds, it has a high probability of happening if a family simply does not wish to pay and euthanasia is allowed. They could pressure the patient into taking the euthanasia route, even if they could have survived the cancer with chemotherapy. And the opposite situation is true as well. What if the family doesn't agree that the patient should be euthanized? If the patient wants euthanasia, but the family disagrees and is willing to pay the cost of the chemotherapy, why should the patient be euthanized? There are drugs to help ease pain, and there is the possibility that they might survive, too. What you say is true. I would like to be able to face death on my own terms. But what if it isn't on my own terms? What if the doctor forced me into euthanasia? That's a high probability that could easily happen if if euthanasia were allowed. If a doctor has the power to take someone's life, they could easily abuse that power for blackmail, murder, or even just petty revenge. And if one extrapolates that even farther, a group of doctors who believe in, say, a master race, could form a coalition to eliminate all people they deem necessary. That could result in a death wave like we haven't seen in the United States for over a century. I have to admit as well that our position has a major weakness, which is that we assume that living, no matter how bad, is better than dying in any form. However, I still believe that it is the best option for many people, and it's a good option in my opinion. And what is your compromise? I disagree. I believe that we should not allow euthanasia at all. Instead, we should only allow physician-assisted suicide, and even then, only in a very, very few cases. Well, what do you suggest? No, well, our time's almost up, and that seems like a reasonable compromise. That sounds good. My pleasure. Thank you.